The call came in at 11:14 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock on the wall across from my hospital bed, counting the seconds between the beeps of the heart monitor, trying to convince myself that the number on the screen, 42 beats per minute, wasn't as bad as it sounded. My son's name lit up on my phone. I felt a small wave of relief. 3 days in this place, and he hadn't visited once, but at least he was calling. "Dad." His voice was flat, not worried. Flat. "Hey, son, they're running more tests this afternoon. The cardiologist thinks." "Dad, listen. This Saturday is Colleen's birthday. You know how much she's been planning this? We need the house. Can you call someone to come get you for a few days?" I didn't say anything for a moment. The monitor beeped. "I'm in the cardiac unit," I said. "I know, Dad, but you've been stable for 2 days. The nurses said so, and Colleen already sent out the invitations. 50 people are coming. We can't cancel." "I can't leave the hospital, son. The doctors haven't cleared me." His voice dropped, got tight the way it used to when he was 17 and I wouldn't lend him the car. "Then don't bother coming home after. We'll figure something out." He hung up. I set the phone down on the blanket and looked back at the clock. 11:16. 2 minutes. That's how long it took for my only child to tell me not to come home while my heart was stuttering in my chest. My name is Eugene. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Columbus, Ohio. I designed drainage systems, overpasses, parts of the highway interchange that half this city drives through every single day without thinking about it. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you so you understand what kind of man I am. Methodical, patient, someone who checks the math twice before he signs anything. I should have checked the math on my son a long time ago. His name is Kevin. He's 36. Smart kid, always was. Got his mother's looks and, I'm sorry to say, her talent for spending money that wasn't his. His mother, my ex-wife, Carol, and I divorced when Kevin was 12. It wasn't a war. We just ran out of things to say to each other and agreed it was better for everyone to stop pretending. Kevin stayed with me during the school year, spent summers with Carol in Tucson. I gave him everything I could. College tuition at Ohio State, a used car when he turned 19, a down payment loan, which he never paid back, but I stopped counting when he and Colleen got their first apartment. Colleen. I need to say something about Colleen that I couldn't say for a long time because I kept telling myself I was wrong, that I was just an overprotective father who couldn't accept his son's choices. I wasn't wrong. Colleen was the kind of woman who smiled at you with her whole face while she calculated exactly what you were worth. She had Kevin convinced that any boundary I set was an attack, that any advice I offered was control, that my house, the house I'd owned for 22 years, the house Kevin grew up in, was a resource to be managed, not a home to be respected. They moved in with me 4 years ago. Kevin had been laid off. Colleen was between jobs, which seemed to be her permanent condition. They needed a place to land, they said. 6 months, maybe 8, just until they got back on their feet. 3 years later, they were still there. Kevin had found a new job, project manager at a construction firm, decent salary. Colleen had started selling things online, which mostly meant she bought things and resold them at a small loss and called it a business. They paid no rent. They contributed nothing to utilities. They ate my food, used my internet, and when I suggested, gently, twice, that maybe it was time to start thinking about their own place, Colleen would find a way to get Kevin sullen and quiet for the rest of the week. I let it go. That's the truth of it. I let it go because Kevin was my son and I didn't want to lose him over an argument about a lease. The chest pain started on a Sunday evening in March. I thought it was indigestion at first. Made myself some ginger tea, sat in my recliner, watched the news. By 10 o'clock the pain had spread to my left arm and I knew. I drove myself to the ER because I didn't want to make a scene. That's the kind of stupid pride that can kill you. The doctors later told me I was about 40 minutes away from a very different outcome. 2 stents, 3 days in the cardiac unit, a follow-up stress test, a whole new list of medications on a laminated card they sent home with me. Kevin and Colleen never came to the hospital, not once. My coworker, a woman named Beverly who retired the same year I did, brought me soup on the second day. My neighbor from 2 doors down, a retired postal worker named Stu, came by on the third. My own son sent a text on day 2 that said, "Hope you're feeling better. Things are busy here." And then the call on Tuesday morning. I lay in that bed for the rest of the day after Kevin hung up, and I made a decision. Not an angry decision. I was past anger by then, a careful one. The kind of decision you make when you finally accept that the problem isn't going away and you spent too long pretending it might. I called my attorney. His name is Jim, and I've known him since our daughters played soccer together in the 90s. His daughter, my niece, who I coached for 2 seasons. I told him what had happened and what I suspected might be happening at the house. "Stay calm," he said. "Don't tip them off. When are they discharging you?" "Friday, if the stress test goes well. Call me Thursday evening. I need to tell you what I came home to." The stress test went fine. Better than expected, the cardiologist said, which I took as permission to deal with what needed dealing with. Stu picked me up Friday morning. I didn't tell Kevin I was being discharged. I just came home. My key still worked, which surprised me. I'd half expected the locks to be changed. The living room was different. My grandfather's armchair, a green wingback that had sat in the corner of that room since before Kevin was born, was gone. In its place was a sectional sofa I'd never seen, cream-colored, enormous, still with a tag from a furniture store in Westerville hanging off one of the cushions. My bookshelves had been rearranged. Half my books were gone, stacked in cardboard boxes in the hallway, I discovered later, as if they were being prepared for donation without anyone asking me. My bedroom door was closed. I opened it. Colleen had converted my bedroom into what appeared to be a photography studio. There was a ring light on a tripod, a white cloth backdrop pinned to my wall, and a small, rolling rack of clothing I didn't recognize. My own things, my clothes, my photos, the box of letters I kept from my father, were in 2 plastic storage bins shoved against the far wall. I stood there for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and sat at my own table. Kevin came downstairs 20 minutes later in his work clothes. He stopped in the kitchen doorway when he saw me. "Dad, you didn't say you were coming home today." "It's my home," I said. He looked at his phone. "Colleen's going to be." "Sit down, Kevin." He sat. "I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did you and Colleen speak to anyone about this house? About the property? Anyone official?" He didn't answer fast enough. "Kevin." "Colleen talked to someone," he said finally, "a financial advisor. She said there were options with the equity. Since you had the heart thing, she thought." "What kind of options?" "I don't know the specifics, Dad." "Yes, you do." He looked at the table. "She was looking into whether there was a way to get a loan against the equity. She has a cousin who does mortgage stuff. I told her it wasn't our house, but she said we live here, and if something happened to you." "Nothing happened to me." "I know that." "Was anything signed, Kevin? Was any document signed?" He shook his head, but he didn't meet my eyes. Jim had already pulled the property records by Thursday evening. Nothing had been filed. No deed transfer, no lien, nothing. But Colleen's cousin, a man named Terry, who operated what appeared to be a semi-legitimate mortgage brokerage out of a strip mall in Gahanna, had submitted an equity loan inquiry using my name and my property address. Jim said it wasn't enough for a fraud charge yet, but it was enough to send a letter. The letter arrived at Terry's office on Monday. It was friendly, professional, and extremely specific about what would happen next if anyone pursued that inquiry further without my written authorization. I never met Terry. I don't know if he called Colleen before or after receiving the letter. But on Monday evening, Colleen came downstairs and told me she thought it would be best if she and Kevin found their own place. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said. "We'll need a few months to save up a deposit." "You'll need 30 days," I said. "I'll give you 30 days from today. That's more than enough time to find a rental and secure a deposit if you've both been employed for the past 2 years, which you have." She stared at me. "Kevin said you wouldn't?" "Kevin and I have already spoken. He agrees this is fair." That wasn't entirely true yet. Kevin and I had spoken, but it had been a hard conversation, one of the hardest of my life. He sat in the kitchen with me for 2 hours on Saturday morning, first defensive, then quiet, then slowly something else. Something that looked like a man realizing he'd been walking in a direction he hadn't chosen. "She made everything seem reasonable," he said at one point. "It probably felt that way," I said. "I should have visited you in the hospital." "Yes, you should have." He didn't try to argue with that. They were out in 26 days. Kevin came back alone on the 27th to pick up 2 boxes he'd left and to return his key. He stood at the door for a moment before he left. "I'm sorry, Dad." "I know you are. Is it okay if I call you?" I looked at my son, 36 years old, standing on my porch holding 2 cardboard boxes, looking like he did when he was 8 and had broken something and was waiting to find out how much trouble he was in. I had been so angry. I had been so tired of being angry. "Call me on Sunday evenings," I said. "We'll talk." He nodded and carried his boxes to the car. I had my grandfather's chair reupholstered, navy blue with brass tacks along the arms. The man at the shop said the frame was solid walnut and the bones were perfect. Just needed fresh fabric and new cushioning. I picked it up on a Wednesday and put it back in its corner, and I sat in it that evening with a cup of decaf and the windows open and the sound of the neighborhood coming in through the screens. I got my books back out of the boxes. Most of them were fine. A few had gotten damp in the garage where Kevin had moved them, and those I had to let go. That bothered me more than it probably should have, but some of them had been with me for decades. You get attached. Beverly brought dinner over on a Friday a few weeks after all of it was settled, a roast chicken and a potato gratin and a bottle of Riesling, and we sat at my table and talked for 3 hours about nothing important. She'd lost her husband 6 years ago. I'd been mostly alone since Carol left. We'd been friends for a long time without either of us making much of it. I think we're both making something of it now. Slowly. The way you do things when you're past 60 and you learn that slow is usually better. Stu replaced the lock on my back door as a favor and wouldn't take any money for it. I gave him a bottle of bourbon instead, which he accepted without complaint. Kevin calls on Sunday evenings. Sometimes we talk for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour. He and Colleen are still together, which I've made my peace with. He's in therapy now, his idea, not mine. He mentioned it on our 3rd call, casually, and I could tell he was waiting to see how I'd react. I told him I thought that was a good idea, and I meant it. I'm not going to tell you the relationship is fully repaired. It isn't. Maybe it will be, one day. I don't know. What I know is that I stopped pretending a long time ago, and I feel better for it. There's a thing they tell you after cardiac surgery, the lifestyle change speech. Eat better, move more, reduce stress. I'd heard it from 3 different doctors and a nutritionist by the time I left the hospital, and I'd nodded along patiently each time because I understood what they were saying about sodium and saturated fat and 30 minutes of walking per day. But I think what they're really talking about is simpler than any of that. They're talking about not carrying weight that was never yours to carry. I spent 4 years carrying weight in that house. carrying the cost of two adults who decided my home was a softer option than working for their own, carrying the silence of all the conversations I didn't have because I didn't want to cause a problem, carrying the guilt of being the kind of father who might ask his son to do something hard. The chair is back in the corner. The books are back on the shelves. The guest room is a guest room again, which means it's mine to offer to whoever I want, whenever I want. I walk 45 minutes every morning now, around the park 2 blocks over. Sometimes Stu joins me. Sometimes I go alone. My heart rate sits at 68 beats per minute, which my cardiologist says is excellent for a man my age. I think so too. I think about that Tuesday morning more than I probably should. Not with bitterness, I'm past that, but with the particular clarity that comes when you finally see something you've been looking at sideways for years. What Kevin did on that phone call wasn't a sudden change in him. It was the result of a long chain of small choices, mine and his both. Every time I paid a bill I shouldn't have paid. Every time I swallowed a hard conversation to keep the peace. Every time I told myself that things would shift on their own, I was adding another link to that chain. Actions accumulate. Patterns compound. What looks like a single cruel moment is usually just the moment when the weight finally shows. That's not me letting Kevin off the hook. He made his choices, but I made mine too, and I needed to be honest about that before I could do anything useful. The thing about integrity, real integrity, not the kind you talk about, but the kind that holds when it costs you something, is that it has to be practiced in small moments before it can survive big ones. I hadn't practiced it with Kevin. I'd been generous in a way that looked like love, but functioned like avoidance. I gave him money, space, patience. What I didn't give him for too long was the truth of what I expected from him as a grown man. He had to sit in a kitchen with me for 2 hours on a Saturday morning and hear things he didn't want to hear. That was hard. I won't pretend otherwise, but it was also the most honest conversation we'd had in years, and when it was over, something had shifted in the room. Not fixed, shifted. That's the difference between a real conversation and the comfortable one. Jim used to say, back when our kids played soccer and we'd stand on the sideline in the cold, that the worst thing you can do for someone is make their problems disappear before they've figured out how to face them. I didn't fully understand that then. I do now. Colleen was a harder lesson. There was a time I wanted to blame her entirely, and the truth is, some of it was hers to own. But Kevin is a grown man. He had to decide what kind of person he wanted to be. That he's in therapy now, that he calls on Sunday evenings and actually talks, that he said, "I'm sorry," and meant it. None of that came from comfort. It came from consequence. I walked 45 minutes this morning. The air was cool and the park was mostly empty, and I felt my heart doing what it's supposed to do, steady, measured, present. That's all I'm asking of it. The chair is back in the corner. The books are back on the shelves. I'm not carrying weight that wasn't mine to carry. I don't know what the next few years look like, but I know what they don't look like, and some mornings, that's enough to feel like you got something right.